This is Ukraine's most significant sad innovation. It changed the lens through which crimes against cultural heritage are understood.
Ukraine's failure to register cultural property in private collections is a major issue and violates international obligations.
Hello and welcome to Ukrainian Plains, a special project by Ukraine Media Centre, and I'm your host, Matt Wickham. In this episode, we discuss Russian crimes against cultural heritage and legislation in Ukraine. Kateryna Busol, lawyer at the Crimean Institute for Strategic Studies, is first to speak in today's episode, telling how Ukraine has significantly contributed to shaping international efforts to address cultural erasure during both conflict and peace. She tells that by highlighting the suppression of cultural identity and the destruction of heritage, these initiatives have helped reframe global attention on protecting cultural rights and resisting neo-imperialistic policies.
Another important aspect of our cooperation with Ukraine, specifically with the public sector, was our work with the parliament. MP Evgenia Kravchuk worked in the PACE for more than 1.5 years on drafting a resolution, the first in the history of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and quite innovative for innovational law as a whole, a resolution and report on cultural erasure and the fight against cultural erasure during armed conflict and peacetime. This is Ukraine's most significant sad innovation. It changed the lens through which crimes against cultural heritage are understood, and they are now frequently associated with physical destruction that is not justified by military necessity or, for example, displacement from occupied territories. More subtle, elaborate violations of cultural heritage, as seen first in the case of the Bakhchisarai Palace, include gradual destruction of an object under the guise of so-called reconstruction, as well as changing exhibition narratives or curricular narratives. Such subtle violation of cultural heritage, as well as cultural and educational rights, have received little attention under international law. Thanks to the effort of the Ukrainian team and Ms. Evgenia, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe adopted Resolution 2558 in early summer this year, which addresses the issue of cultural erasure, specifically Russification, not only in Ukraine but also in Belarus and with regard to other indigenous people in Russia. That is, Ukraine accurately demonstrated Russia's neo-imperialist policy in both occupied and unoccupied territories. This work is already having an effect on the activities of other organizations, for example, in its two most recent reports on human rights in the occupied territories and the standards or lack thereof in the temporarily occupied territories over the last 2 years since the full-scale invasion. The UN monitoring mission in Ukraine began to discuss violations such as suppressing expressions of Ukrainian identity. The correct wording emphasizes the cultural property destruction or displacement is not sufficient to cover the issue. The question of liability also includes what reparation Ukraine can seek for what types of damage. It is critical that the newly established damage register in The Hague allows for the registration of cultural property damages. It is critical that the UN Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, the UN Special Investigation Commission, focus on the destruction of cultural heritage sites as well as the indoctrination of Ukrainian children by Russian propaganda. And it is imperative that existing or future compensation mechanisms account for these types of damage, because it will also constitute a form of Russian liability. And these damages, the monetization of these cultural heritage damages, and the inability to exercise cultural and educational rights are additional reasons not only to freeze but also to transfer Russian asset to compensate for the full range of damages. So I encourage us to remember the liability in both the decisions of judicial institutions, which we very much want to have, and more effective international law, as well as a wide range of reparations that we can claim, particularly for damages against cultural heritage.
Olga Butkevych, president of the Ukrainian Association of International Law, is next, who speaks how Ukraine is currently conducting a thorough review of its cultural heritage protection laws to assess compliance with international standards and identify areas for improvement. A major challenge, she tells, is the lack of official registers for cultural property, making it difficult to track damage or displacement, especially in smaller museums and private collections.
Ukrainian Association of International Law is currently drafting a document, an analysis of the compliance of Ukrainian legislation, which will serve as the primary document in this area. It is the 1972 Convention for the Protection of the World's Cultural and Natural Heritage. It's the 1954 Hague Convention on the Protection of Cultural Property, and the second additional protocol to the Hague Convention on the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict. A small example. As of today, this document is approximately 200 pages long. This is an analysis of Ukraine's obligations, as well as an analysis of the current situation, including where it fulfills them, where it doesn't, and what needs to be done. For example, under the Hague Convention, a state party has dual obligations in the field of cultural property protection during armed conflict. The first means that if there is an armed conflict on its territory, its armed forces should not use cultural property, establish military facilities there, attack or bombard cultural property, and so on. That is, these are passive actions that this party should take while avoiding the actions that would harm cultural property. However, there is another important aspect for Ukraine to consider: prevention. The Hague Convention requires that each state, in a period of absolute peace, take all necessary precautions to ensure that, in the event of an armed conflict on its territory, cultural property is protected and not damaged. And now a question arises. The most famous example is the rescue of Maria Primachenko's painting collection from the occupied regions of northern Kyiv. We've heard a lot about the heroic rescue of this collection. Why did it happen, and how did it become possible when Ukraine decided to evacuate such things from potentially dangerous areas? Then we wouldn't need to take any heroic measures to save them. The second major issue is the absence of official registers for cultural property in Ukraine. This primarily refers to cultural property kept in museums of non-national significance. This could be village or school museums. This may be museums with no statues at all. Nonetheless, they possess cultural objects. We don't know how many of them were looted, or if these museums are located in occupied territory, how many were removed or destroyed because there are no registers. Ukraine's failure to register cultural property in private collections is a major issue and violates international obligations.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center, dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian War, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find more information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you like our work and find it useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini.